Hi, everyone on Chef AJ's YouTube channel. Thank you for having me. My name is Dr. Colin Zhu, and happy Saturday, April 1st. Some of you are watching this live, some of you are going to watch this afterwards, and really grateful and humbled and honored again to be on Chef AJ's show. And I have a special talk prepared for you guys. I'm really humbled for Chef AJ to have me on her monthly spot. And last time we had a talk, today we're going to have a talk as well. And the next two times I'm going to definitely do live demos, I promise. But I wanted to kind of wrap up, in a way, connect the last lecture to this lecture, because I think this talk is very, very important. And it really just kind of, as a highlight to the broader picture of everything. So my presentation today is rooted in plants and planet. And a lot of times, and a lot of guests of Chef AJ, are really esteemed colleagues and really breaking down the science, breaking down the different components of health and disease and chronic disease and the ins and outs of different types of eating patterns. But I think it's also important to really talk about how we eat on individual level and how that connects in our food choice and how that connects more broadly to the wider picture. So a lot of the themes that we're going to be talking about today is really the connection of our food choices, our eating patterns, and as important it is and essential to talk about that, how does that connect? Okay, so doing a little bit different today. And stay tuned to the end. I have a couple announcements, so you don't want to miss this. And also, we have a lot of slides, so I will do my best to be as expedient as possible, be concise, but also be efficient. All right, so here we go. So what does it mean to have health, right? When you think about this question, you want to break it down. How would you define health? Is health defined as the absence of disease? Or is it, okay, let me just eat as well as I can. Let me move my body. What does health mean? Does health mean just mental health? Is it all the above? So I want you to think about that a little bit. We're going to show you some pictures. Does health mean, moving your body? Like I said, does it mean getting a good enough sleep? Or does it mean, having that social connection and connecting and being involved in a community, just like Chef AJ has built over time? And I want you to take a couple looks at this two words, okay, that I have on the screen, okay? There's illness and then there's wellness, right? And so I want you to think about how similar they are and then also how dissimilar they are, right? And then, why would I put this up? And what does it mean, right? Now, take a look at this and then see what happens when I do this. I break it apart, okay? Does anyone see, what the differences are now? On your left-hand side, you see that illness, there's I. And then on wellness, there's we. One of the things we want to think about is that our health and disease that happens when we have poor health does not operate in silos. There's a lot of different pieces. There's a lot of different components that happen under the hood, but there are a lot of different things that happen outside of our body that interplay. There is a internal and an external environment that we interplay with the rest of the world. And the we, I find this to be quite, poignant, is the fact that, when you have illness, there's an I, and when you have wellness, there's a we. So there's a sense of togetherness and there's a sense of connectedness with the greater whole. And I want you to to have that as a food for thought. So I want you to look at, these stats. These are the latest CDC stats in 2021, and you have 1 through 10. Okay. Still the top two are heart disease and cancer. Okay. What's newer is COVID. Okay. As we know, and as the rest of the world knows that, COVID has definitely rampaged, this planet in very, very different ways. Okay. And then you also have, accidents, strokes, Alzheimer's, cognitive decline, diabetes, liver, and kidney disease. Right. And I want you to kind of look at it and, ask yourself, is there a diet/lifestyle component related to any of these? Okay. And then another food for thought is the fact that 90% of our nation's 4.1 trillion expenditures are with people and involved with people with chronic and mental health conditions. Now, when we break down COVID even more, what we tend to find over time and from the stats and data we've collected is that when we have certain medical conditions, it gives us a higher risk for COVID: asthma, cancer, okay, kidney disease, liver disease, okay, cognitive decline, diabetes, heart conditions, carrying extra weight, right, and smoking. So do you see similar themes, with this, with also the top, 10 causes of death, right? And so there are, heavy, heavy, heavy diet and lifestyle influences with most of these, okay? And so my point is that we have the ability to take control of our health, to be empowered by it, if we have the right tools, information, and awareness. And what's interesting is that when the pandemic first started, there's always breaking news on CNN, right? Always these stats, these climbing stats of COVID, okay? Which I'm not trying to downplay or to, underestimate it by any means. But every single year from the 1950s, okay, heart disease has always been number one, okay? And when you combine heart disease and stroke, it takes almost about 900,000 Americans every single year. And it costs the healthcare system $216 billion per year, okay? And also the indirect effects is job productivity, okay? The economic effects, okay, that we don't talk about as much, but it affects us as much in the community. A quote by Hippocrates, a lot, we see Hippocrates as the founder of modern medicine. Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. So let me reintroduce myself. My name is Dr. Colin Zhu. I'm the founder of TheChefDoc. I was born to two immigrant parents. They've taught me the values of compassion, authenticity, and integrity. Double boarded in family and lifestyle medicine. Found that my education gave me very little in terms of diet and lifestyle curricula. And every patient that walked through our doors, whether it's a chief complaint of cough or low back pain, had some sort of lifestyle risk factor attached to them. So I made a lot of detours. I went to culinary school, got sort of a health coaching, and then I just made it my mission to really teach, educate, and inspire and empower others. And so TheChefDoc was born in 2017. I learned a lot about food through my different experiences. I realized that, no matter where you are in the kitchen, there's always something to learn. Including myself. I'm constantly learning, constantly, putting a lot more in my own repertoire. And it's very important to feel that, you have these tools and education to empower others. And also when, as a practitioner of lifestyle medicine, I'm using evidence-based lifestyle approaches to prevent, treat, and reverse disease, you realize that it's really a profession of accountability and it's important to practice what you preach. So I always walk my talk, okay? These are my fellow healthcare staff and professionals. This was a job that I did in a Indian health reservation. And so I was walking, post lunch around the reservation. My culinary experiences really stem from my parents, both cooking at the same time. And it really improved my experiences and my, confidence and comfort level in terms of the kitchen. And then I went to the Natural Gourmet Institute, which has been a plant-based and health supportive school, really gave me the foundation to really cook for myself, cook my family, but also, teach others in terms of how to arm themselves. This is me teaching at a national conference for healthcare professionals. How I relate back to, the world is the fact that with my own personal and professional experiences, I traveled a lot as well. And humbled to say that I've touched every single continent on the planet. And there's a very important factor to this. It allows me to, go outside my comfort levels. It allows me to respect and accept people where they're at, learn about how people live their lives. And it taught me a lot about global citizenship and how I'm just one person out of what is now 7.8 billion people on the planet. And I also was able to witness firsthand, observations of climate change. I also am a certified scuba diver. What did my scuba experiences teach me? Well, it taught me a lot about, my place of Zen. I find it very peaceful to be underwater without noise. The only noise that I hear is just bubbles. And there's a lot of the ocean floor, which takes up 2/3 of planet Earth. And yet, 80% of the ocean is unmapped, unexplored, and undiscovered, which is quite, astonishing to me, especially since we're putting so much money going into outer space. And then from here, I've also witnessed firsthand experience of coral bleaching, which is a direct effect of climate change as well. So how do food trends impact on a global scale? And this is where we go to high level from a 35,000 feet level viewpoint. Quick example about how our environment interplays with us. This was taken out of One Health Journal. This was literally recently at the end of February of this year that was published. And this is a simple example of how, for example, zoonotic infections and cross-contaminate and, affect us. And this journal just highlights the amount of asymptomatic bacterial infections that affect our urine, which gives us urinary tract infections, and then can lead to more complicated issues. And this is a result of foodborne issues. And I treat UTIs all the time. So it's very, very important. This is just a simple example of how, the food environments and agricultural environments interplay with us. On a high level, overall, our global diet, so scanning outwardly and going outside of the United States, we've done a systematic analysis over 195 countries from 1990 to 2017. And dietary risk is responsible for millions of deaths. Also, cardiovascular disease is a leading cause of death, followed by cancer. I recently interviewed a breast oncologist on my podcast, and she says globally, cancer is 1 out of 6 responsible for deaths. Okay. This assessment shows that, when you're eating mostly a diet high in sodium, low in whole grains, low in fruit, low in nuts and seeds, and low in vegetables and omega-3 fatty acids, it's responsible for a lot of premature deaths. How do our choices impact the rest of the world? I want you to think about this in terms of a spider web, and how when you touch on one end of the spider web, it reverberates and connects to the other end. And this has a lot to do about how we use our actual land and conventional and modern agricultural practices. And this direct effect from these conventional and current practices affects climate change, biodiversity, the degradation of land and soil, and depletion of fresh water. And a lot of evidence has been showing that, our greenhouse gases and the emission of these greenhouse gases is not making this environmentally sustainable. A resilience expert out of Stockholm, Carl Vogt, coined the term planetary stewardship. And this was very interesting to me because no matter what color you are, what language you speak, what you eat, where you come from, how you live your life, we all have a duty and responsibility for the planet because we all live on the same planet. And to be able to say that your individual choices don't matter could be further from the truth. And it just depends on how you look at, different lenses. The current state of the world is that we're in a very critical decade. And the Paris Agreement, for those who are not familiar with it, is that we have to limit our levels of global temperatures to no more than 2 degrees Celsius. Okay, and we're actually getting really close to that. The recent climate summit in Egypt says that we are making progress in terms of adaptation, but we're not at the scale and speed necessary. And that becomes a huge problem for future generations. How we choose to eat affects our land. Their current land impact, 70% of the Earth's agricultural land is used for livestock. 30% of our land mass is also used for livestock. And not really a problem for, the audience of Chef AJ's, right? But if you know of someone that eats the standard American diet, to sustain one person on that diet, you need 3 football fields, which is really, really astonishing. And if we were to reduce, by going more plant-based, we're able, if you're just reducing and using just 50% of that land, we're able to save a lot, and it's quite an impact. This is a graph, in terms of highlighting different types of animal proteins versus produce that we, make in this country and how much land that's actually used. If you can't see that, from the top to the bottom, you have lamb, beef, cheese, milk, beef, pork. And then as you go down the list, it becomes more plant-based. What I find over time, and being a family practitioner and going around lecturing and public speaking, is that people have a disconnect. And the big picture is that we're missing this disconnection between where is food sourced from and how it arrives to our plate. Okay. And the big picture is that we have a huge demand for eating meat. And because of this, we need to meet that demand, you have to be able to have livestock graze and live off of the land. And, we don't have that land. So you have to mow down and mow down forests. And that leads to replacement of crops for animal feeds. Okay. So a lot of that land is actually going towards, livestock. A lot of the land and the food that we grow, being that corn, soy, soybean are the top two in this country, go towards animal feeds, not even towards human consumption. And then, you are replacing crops for animal feeds, animal graze on these grounds, they're trucked to slaughterhouses, and then these products are trucked to groceries and restaurants, and that's how they end up on our plates. Again, it's not so much for this audience, but again, it's really about understanding, connecting dots, and looking at the big picture. How we choose to eat affects our water. The seafood impact. So this is near and dear to my heart because, as a certified scuba diver, I've witnessed firsthand, coral bleaching, and it's really sobering, unfortunately. And there's just so much life, underwater, and we're, constantly destroying it. A couple examples of how we impact this is that factory farm waste runoff contaminates our rivers, tributaries, lakes, oceans. A lot of the actual grain and corn that is needing to grow to meet the meat demand to feed the livestock, it uses a massive amount of water input. Okay. And then also we have a huge demand of seafood, and we're taking more seafood out of the oceans than the oceans can replenish. And by some estimates, by 2048, all of the world's fisheries could collapse. This is a graph showing water production used for livestock and produce. So for the far end to the right, to be able to produce 1 pound of steak, you need 2,046 gallons of water. How we choose to eat affects our air. So in the middle of America, this is where factory farming happens. We have things called CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations. And it's set up in the middle of America, and it's done in a way where people don't really notice. A lot of the population kind of sits around, coastal areas. And there's a problem with this because, when you're factory farming, it takes a toll on local communities. Dangerous gases like ammonia, methane, and hydrogen sulfide are waste breakdown products, and it causes chronic illnesses and neurological problems. Okay. And not surprisingly, people of color are disproportionately impacted by this because they're actually closer to these CAFOs than than white counterparts. And from 1960 to 2016, just a stat, 215% increase of chicken eaten. And we raised 9 billion chickens annually. And we produce 22.5 billion pounds of poop from these chickens. How we choose to eat affects climate. I used to work in Louisiana. I used to work specifically in New Orleans. Beautiful, beautiful city. And it's a low-lying part of the United States. A lot of the cities along the Gulf are affected by this. Hurricane Katrina, tropical storms face Florida. And very soon, a lot of these cities will be submerged underwater if we don't, do something for climate. If you take nothing else from this slide, just know that industrial animal agriculture contributes to more greenhouse gases than the entire transportation sector combined. And this means trains, planes, cars, trucks, and ships. These are CO2 emissions from food. A lot of beef, cheese, pork, salmon, poultry, canned tuna are on the highest in terms of CO2 emissions. So this begs the question, how can we feed a growing human population and still be able to meet planetary boundaries that is safe and sustainable? There's estimates by the United Nations that we're going to be reaching towards 10 billion by 2050. Okay. And there's a commission report that says that unhealthy diets pose a greater risk to morbidity, mortality than does unsafe sex, alcohol, drug, and tobacco use combined. And so because of this, much of the world's population is inadequately nourished, and many environmental systems and processes are pushed beyond safe boundaries by food production. A global transformation of the food system is urgently needed. So there was something called the Eat Lancet report, and there was a whole commission, and this was released in 2019. And this was the first time that the scientific community came together to define what is safe, what is sustainable, and what can we do that we can recommend to be able to feed people a growing population, and also sustain Mother Earth. And they recommended a flexitarian diet. Okay. And I know that the audience of Chef AJ are more proponents of, a vegan, low fat, whole food, plant-based diet. But, this is a shift in the right direction because it's dramatically, eating less, because not every pocket of the world has the same ecosystem, same environment. Okay. And so, diets are going to be different, but they did advise eating 5 servings of meat or fish per week, and then heavily emphasizing a lot more nuts and legumes, fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. This is a study that just literally came out last month in the Journal of Nutrition, just looking at a review of the environmental sustainability of plant-based dietary patterns. And the results have been favorable, saying that, by shifting more for a plant-based diet, it does offer less greenhouse gas emissions, land use, biodiversity loss than offered by other standard diets. We don't know how much of the water energy impact use because it depends on the different types of plant-based diets. Okay. So what do we do as individuals? What do we do as a community? Action steps, you have a wealth of resources and lectures and great video content here at Chef AJ, but also be reminded that, you can do a lot, and the biggest thing is voting and buying with your fork. Voting and buying with your fork is a vote towards, eating more plants and buying from, local farmers, okay, vegetable growers, okay, things like that. Join a community sustainable agriculture, a home food delivery. And most importantly is to also reduce food waste, okay, and we'll talk about that in 2 seconds. Recycle and compost. And then, a great idea would be growing your own food. You can even start with just a culinary herb garden. From the commission report, they also recommended that food waste at every stage, okay, from the manufacturing, the processing, to the grocers, to, how it arrives to your plate and the fridge. Americans waste up to 40% of food, okay, and that's a drastic number. This alone accounts for 6 to 8% of greenhouse gases. And we have to be able to shift our farming practices from emitting carbon to sequestering carbon, okay? And by growing more, okay, especially trees, okay, and shifting our, the way we handle our ocean waters, we have a great opportunity to be able to trap carbon. Okay. Also circulate nutrients, then polluting and saving water. Okay. And this is in the form of regenerative and sustainable farming practices. Here's an example that I highlight. I personally went to this farm and toured them. They were very gracious to allow me to tour their farm and film and interview. So I interviewed different types of people there, including the co-founder and CEO. And they are originally vegetable growers. They're located in Northern Ohio. They've been around for 30 plus years, 2 generations, and they practice regenerative sustainable agriculture. Over the pandemic, they have shifted to delivering food boxes, which is a great way of getting the most nutritious food produce. And so, an apple today and your conventional produce is not the same as an apple 50 years ago. Okay. We have a lot of nutrient loss, mostly because of the fact of, whether you're practicing non-organic GMO type of farming, in addition to conventional farming as well. You're losing a lot of nutrients. And they have their own lab there, which I found really unique. And they have their own Culinary Institute on the farming grounds, which I also found super unique. Okay. And their labs, I find that, they told me that their produce is 300 to 600 times more nutritious than the actual food that you go to your local markets. Okay. So shifting gears a little bit is, we have to think about our healthcare provider, okay, and what they're offering. So consider a few things. And this is a, pretty interesting image that I, found off of social media. If your doctor prescribes you medication without first asking about your diet, your sleep, your exercise routine, your water consumption, whether you have any structural issues and or the stress in your life, then you don't have a doctor, you have a drug dealer, okay? Not to poke fun at my, medical colleagues, but it's true. we're not really equipped, very ill prepared with, nutrition, diet, lifestyle, and it really detriments us. Okay. This is a cartoon. Are you eating properly and getting plenty of exercise? This is very important because practicing lifestyle medicine, like I said, is really a profession of accountability and practicing what you preach. Studies have shown that, patients still want to go to their doctor to be able to make these diet and lifestyle changes. Of course, nowadays, a lot of us Google everything first. But, we still would like to turn to our, physician for the most up-to-date nutritional and lifestyle education and information. It wasn't too long ago. I did not grow up in this time period where doctors actually advertised, for smoking, which is not that long ago. And so if we're able to drastically reduce and be able to publicly aware about the dangerous effects of smoking, we can do the same thing, with food. I want to highlight another example of, people of doctor colleagues that are doing great things. This is my good friend, Dr. Robert Graham. He's in New York City. This is a few years back where he started the first edible and educational rooftop garden on top of a hospital. And what's cool about this is that the produce that they created and grown off of that rooftop goes into the hospital cafeteria, which literally goes to the patients. And the patients were literally eating the fruit of their own labor. So these are a, list of doctors that I work with. We were originally plant-based telehealth. We are now Love Life Telehealth. The, founder of Whole Food Markets, John Mackey, has decided to create a new venture, and we are working with him in terms of delivering solid healthcare, in terms of lifestyle medicine, in terms of plant-based nutrition. So if you're needing a lifestyle medicine, plant-based, physician, you can find us on Love Life, which is the new company. And I'll be able to give you, websites in terms of how to access and just making sure that you are listed, you are physically in the state that we are licensed in. So that's just a caveat. For me personally, I always, want to be able to empower patients to go back into their kitchen to take back their health. That's super, super important. And, it's really learning about food. And what's the best way to learn about it? Experimenting with yourself, experimenting with others, not being afraid of messing up, practicing the art of winging it. Nothing is perfect the first time, and understanding that it's not the cooking process, it's really the meal prep. And so if you can organize, have a process, have a system in play, you'll be able to be successful. And what do I teach to my own patients? Shopping along the perimeter of the supermarket, learning about the produce aisle, learning about the nutrition label, learning about different types of, places to source your food. Okay. Just a few concepts that I teach. More action steps. Chef AJ's audience is very varied. You have health coaches here, physicians, chefs, community members, and people from the healthcare system. It's really about, spreading awareness, giving talks, learning about food, learning how to cook, okay, and just being involved. And at the end of the day, when we're talking about our individual health and how that relates to the greater whole in terms of planetary health, okay, it's not just about, food as medicine, but it's also about different pillars. And this is talking about self-care. This is talking about being part of a community. This is talking about the quality of relationships, okay, moving our body, okay, getting in touch with nature, and practicing resilience, learning how to pivot. Okay. One of the things, that I definitely want to share is that, for those of you who've been following, we just launched the TheChefDoc app. We are having all of our resources under one roof. You can download it on your, Apple stores as well as your Google Play stores. And our aim is to really arm, the end user with educational resources. There's video content there, audio content there. We have the first 150 episodes of the podcast there. And we are also rolling out coaching services. Okay. So if you want to have more guidance, we are going to offer coaching services soon, group coaching, as well as one-on-one coaching with yours truly. Okay. And we also have a social responsibility. Part of, the TheChefDoc is also being socially responsible, like I said, with this lecture. And I've partnered with One Tree Planted as well as Seed Trees. And so basically every dollar that is generated from the proceeds of the app, goes towards planting a tree on land, as well as planting a sea tree, okay, a coral reef, okay, a mangrove, okay, kelp, goes towards planting this back into the soil as well as back into the ocean, because that's one of the best ways of trapping carbon, so we could, help with the climate change. So we're dedicating 10% of the proceeds that are generated from the app to go towards in helping these nonprofit organizations. So the best way to contact us is that email, team@thechefdoc.app. That's the website. Okay. All of the information, including the telehealth, telecoaching services, can be found through that website. And if you want to download, the app, you can just open up your camera and then just scan that QR code right now and, be able to download it. It is free to download. There are free lessons. Okay. And if you have any questions, just let us know. And I, thank Chef AJ so much for having me. And I can't wait to see you guys for the live demo. I definitely have something planned for you guys for the next show. And be safe. Health is wealth, and continue to thrive. And thank you so much to everyone that decided to watch in and spend a few moments with us today. And thank you. Thank you so much, Chef AJ. Bye-bye.